Good morning, Metaverse. I'm Thor with the Red Hand. I'm going to get right into it. I have put together a spreadsheet tool to help facilitate with a peer-to-peer trade of the uh, different resources and components that we are crafting in Sage Labs. There's always going to the marketplace and to be able to sell these items specific straight for Atlas. And Atlas currency is always a great medium to facilitate the trade. What I essentially did was reverse engineer the method that you get to a currency as the medium and brought it back to a trade scenario. And for people that are working closely with each other, or working in a guild with a group of people, and you want to do those trades directly peer-to-peer, and you have trust, this obviously brings trust back into the equation. But it's outside of the marketplace, especially if you're doing things strategically. This could be very helpful to figure out what is a fair trade, or what are the ratios that one component should be traded for another. So let's jump right into that. I'll show you how this tool works. Okay, cool. So I'm still going to be working a little bit of user interface, and I'm not going to give you release dates in case I go past my release dates. I learned all that from Star Atlas. But this is my trade value table. And what I did is compiled all of the times that it takes to craft, all of the number of resources that it needs to go into different crafting, as well as some real market values, brought that in there, and then put it together to create a ratio from one component to a second, and how they would trade together. So let me go through and break this down and show you some of the equations that I have. I'm going to make this document public and available. It's an Excel document, so if you have Microsoft Office tools, you would be able to. I'll be sharing it publicly, so you should be able to use this. I haven't broken it down to like Google Docs yet, in case some of those equations don't go through. But this is how it works. So breaking it down to basically the smallest unit that these components can be traded by. And that I found by taking the smallest ship, the most basic functional unit in Star Atlas is the Fimbule air bike. And what is the opportunity cost of having it in Sage Labs versus Score? So if I were to stake it in Score, the opportunity value of that is essentially you could earn with one Fimbule air bike up to 0.735, so 0.735 Atlas, and I use this Azerbaijan symbol just because it's the closest thing to an A. So all of these are in Atlas where you see those symbols. So if I had a Fimbule air bike in Score, I can make 0.735 Atlas a day. Well, if I'm taking it out of Sage, that's my opportunity cost. I can't make that. So at the very least, if I'm going to bring one of my air bikes into Sage Labs and start crafting, that is its value. And so that's where I'm bringing everything else out from. And so then what I did is I broke down all the raw resources, and the raw resources are the starting point for the value of this entire crafting tree. Because you could just go onto the market and buy raw materials and do the crafting yourself to get all the way up this tree. And so at the time that I was collecting the data, biomass was at 0.0639 Atlas. Okay, so I just entered all these in. It will change, and eventually I will try to scrape data so that it is updating on a consistent basis. But as it is right now, I just have to manually put in the current market value. And so once you have the raw materials market value at the current time, then you can extrapolate everything else out. So if this were to change to 0.07 Atlas, then all of my numbers would change accordingly. Then for the food, this is how it would break down. I took the raw material cost, multiplied that by 2 because it takes 2 biomass to make 1 food. Then I added this number here, and this is the time value. And the time value I got as a result of what the amount of time that it takes for 1 crew to craft 1 unit. Okay, and so for food, I have that value down here. Below that is 1 second for 1 crew member to craft 1 piece of food. Okay, and so then I multiply that by the quantity. Therefore, I can see its value if I change the quantities. So if I wanted to see, all right, what's my value of 10,000 food or 100,000 food? Well, then that's going to be at that pricing, that's going to be 99,069 Atlas. Okay, see how that works? And then the time value changes accordingly. All right. And the time value will be commutative as well. So this takes 1 second to craft food. If I took from food, or I should say 1 second to craft copper in this scenario, and then from copper I go to ammo, and so it takes 1 second to copper, 1 second to ammo. That equals a total of 2 seconds of crafting time. And so 2 seconds of crafting time multiplied by the 0.735 or I should say 0.735 divided by 86,400 seconds per day, and then you get that value. Okay, so there's a lot of little pieces to it. And if this is boring, then skip ahead to the thumbtack, and we'll get to the basics of it. But I wanted to show you how these equations fall together. So that's how all these green boxes, and essentially that's the crafting tree. That's how each of these sections in the crafting tree, they have the same equations, but when they get more complex, the strange emitter, when I go to that equation, you can see that's pulling from the luminite and the polymer, and that's pulling four polymer and 2 luminite. Okay, so polymer times 4, luminite times 2, and then the same equation. These 2 items added together, and then plus the time value, and then multiplied by the quantity that we have here. And so this can give you also a good idea if you see something on the marketplace. Well, is this a good value? And I would think of these prices as sort of the prime value. This is before you add on any premium for providing that service, right? So if you think of the prime values, and then someone brings their service into that, they add on a premium so that they make a profit. But you can take a look at these numbers compared to the market price and say, okay, for what its prime value is according to the raw materials, they have a 10% premium on this price. Is it worth 10% premium for me to just buy an electromagnet, or to buy 1,100 electromagnets versus going through and doing it myself? Okay, and so that is kind of another use of this part of the tool, and just using these boxes. Now, when I bring this back all down to ones, then I take a look up here with my components, and so I put component 1 for component 2. This is my trade part of it. And so in this box, I simply put in the component that I want to trade. And all you need to do is define the ratio. How many of these for how many of those? And so I take a look and I want to see, in this scenario, I do how many electromagnets would I trade somebody for, and I put in component 2. Component 2 is the crystal lattice. So I'm going to highlight these. I'm going to highlight these in a different color so everybody can see that. These are the 2 that I want to trade. Okay. And so what I've done is this value is in component 1. This value is in component 2. Then I do a ratio, and basically component 2 divided by component 1, and that brings up 0.745347. Okay, so basically 3/4. And so what I'm doing is how many components of electromagnets should I trade for crystal lattices? Well, if I have 300 electromagnets that I'm going to trade, then I should be getting about 224 crystal lattices in return, and then that would be a fair trade according to this standard. And I like the standard because first, the prices themselves are generated from the free market, because all the raw materials on the marketplace are what govern the prices of everything else down this tree. So as far as being in favor of a free market system, choosing the prices, this checks that box. It also includes the value of time, and the value of time spent crafting. So that is taken into consideration. All right, that is added on as well. So to just jump back real quick to the raw resources and why I like using the free market to choose those starting points is there was actually a really good point brought up from the perspective of, okay, everybody goes out and mines the resources from a place, but what about the travel time to get there, like the fuel costs? What about that? Do we have to? I'd have to factor in the cost of travel and the fuel burn. Well, different ships burn fuel at different rates, so that's incredibly confusing and literally impossible to figure out how much your fleet burns versus how much my fleet burns in this trade to be perfect. Now, I suspect that the difference is going to be relatively small, depending on the size of your deal or your trade, but it should be, there is that difference, and that was a good point. Well, how do you factor that in? And then also, which area are they mining those resources from? What's the richness of that resource? What's the hardness of those resources? And so there's another 50 different calculations that you have to do in order to make a perfect fair trade. But that's the great thing about a free market. The free market takes all those concepts and allows the people that know their business the best to determine, is this profitable for me to sell this resource at this price? And if it's not, if it doesn't match their premium, which calculates in all the costs put in to mine those resources, they've done those calculations for you and set it on the market. And by using that free market calculator, it cuts down a lot of the work down to the last few steps, which this table then completes. So I like this as a standard of trade. It's what I am going to use when I'm trading peer-to-peer. And then the piece that is important about trading peer-to-peer versus bring it to just on the marketplace, it cuts out some fees, minor, and that's fine. If you want to support Star Atlas by doing it on the marketplace, that's great. But what if you want to give a better deal to your faction? Right? If you're dealing with oosters or you're dealing with onis, mud, and you don't want to put the really reduced price up on the marketplace, you would put a premium to the public, right? But you'd have a private sale. this is a way to figure that out. The final reason that I really advocate for the trading technique is if you partner up with somebody in order to progress through the crafting tree, it can provide some massive benefits and cost reduction. And let me explain. So if I'm going out and I'm getting a faction crystal, I'm mining Arco, Diamond, or Reikonol, however that word's pronounced, and then I want to make crystal lattices. I would have to go out to get the faction crystals and come back. That's a round trip faction crystals, and then I'd have to go out to hydrogen, a round trip to and from to get the hydrogen. But if I teamed up with somebody, I would travel out to get the crystals, they would travel out to get the hydrogen, so I'm not spending money on the fuel there, and then we would come back, and then we could trade according to the ratios. And so it's a 2 to 7 ratio to craft the crystal lattices, 2 Arco, in my case it is an Ooster, to 7 hydrogen, okay? And then if we're putting together the time value on top of that, we can get very close to a perfect fair. So those are my thoughts and some tips on how to be more effective and be able to work with other people in the community and within your guilds, within your factions, making a few more strategies available to everybody. So again, I'm going to make this document public so that you can use it. Please let me know if you see any mistakes. I went over my math several times and reviewed it again and again, but each time finding one thing here, one thing there. I went through and got a clear slate, and so hopefully it is in perfect condition. But drop comments in the description below. Also, if people know how to take this raw information or basic table and turn it into a smart contract, or how to put it on a little bit higher quality UI, maybe put it into a website that can be accessed by the community. Let me know. I'd be happy to work with you and make that happen. Don't worry about liking or subscribing. Screw that algorithm. But if you find somebody that could use this, please share it with them. If you do that, then today was a good day. Good morning, Metaverse.